There are some men you can hear before they ever walk into a room. Not loud men, not the ones slapping backs and ordering drinks they won't finish. I mean the quiet kind, the kind that makes a table go still without asking. Stu Ungar was that kind. If you were sitting in a smoky card room in the 1970s and somebody whispered, "The kid's here," you didn't ask which kid. You knew. And if you didn't know, you were about to learn something expensive. He was small, 5'5" on a generous day, dark hair, sharp eyes that never seemed to blink long enough for you to breathe. He didn't look like a myth. Myths usually have better posture. Stu looked like a kid who'd wandered away from a high school math class and found himself under casino lights. But the first time you watched him hold cards, you understood. Most people have to study a game. Stu just remembered it. Not in the way you or I remember where we left our keys, in the way a pianist remembers every note in a concerto after hearing it once. He saw patterns the way most of us see colors, and that would have been a blessing if blessings came with instructions. To understand what Stu Ungar became at a poker table, you have to look at what he was at a gin rummy table. And that's a story that sounds made up, which is usually the first sign that it's completely true. He grew up in New York, 1953, son of a bookmaker. His father ran Fox's Corner, a bar on Manhattan's Lower East Side where the regulars drank and wagered. Stu learned numbers before he learned caution. By 10, he was running betting slips. By his early teens, he'd found gin rummy. Gin is a memory game disguised as a card game. 2 players, 10 cards each. The rest of the deck sits between you like a secret neither of you can fully see. Every card that leaves the deck becomes part of a growing equation. What's gone? What's possible? What's left? Most people try to play gin. Stu simply counted it. He could track every discard, every pickup, every hesitation in an opponent's breath. The old-timers in New York didn't argue with that. They just stopped playing him. By 16, he was beating grown professionals for real money. By 18, he was playing for thousands a night. In 1976, he won the World Series of Gin Rummy, a tournament so lopsided in his favor that organizers quietly stopped hosting it after he dominated. When you remove competition from a game because one man solved it, that's not hype, that's paperwork. I've sat in small-town card rooms where a local legend runs the table for a few weeks and folks start inventing reasons to avoid him. Got a headache. Wife needs me home. With Stu, there were no excuses. There was just the understanding that sitting across from him was a donation. He didn't grind his way to the top of gin. He arrived there fully formed. And that's where something subtle begins. When things come easy early on, a man never learns the habits the rest of us need just to stay afloat. The trouble with being that good at something, genuinely once-in-a-generation good, is that eventually nobody wants to play you anymore. By his early 20s, Stu Ungar had gotten so dominant in the New York and New Jersey gin rummy circuit that players simply refused to sit across from him. The game dried up. The money dried up. The room cleared every time he walked in. Gin rummy had a ceiling. Poker didn't. So eventually the road led to Las Vegas. By the late 1970s, the money had shifted west. Las Vegas was humming, and Texas Hold'em had become the game that mattered. Stu followed the action not because he loved poker. He thought gin required more skill, and knowing Stu, he probably meant it. But he did so because poker had something gin didn't: bigger stakes. Texas Hold'em is a game where gin players sometimes struggle. The two games share DNA. Card memory matters. Pattern recognition matters. But poker introduces a dimension that gin doesn't have, or at least not in the same way. Poker has people in it. You're reading your opponent. Their hesitation, their posture, the way they reach for their chips. Stu had come to Vegas with the confidence of a man who'd never been outcalculated, and in 1980, at 26 years old, he entered the World Series of Poker main event. The main event, for those unfamiliar, is the Super Bowl, the World Cup, and the Kentucky Derby of poker rolled into one. Poker's biggest stage, the one your uncle swears he's going to win someday. The winner takes nearly everything, and that's why the best players in the world converge on it. Careers are defined by it. Men have played for decades chasing a single victory there. In 1980, it was still intimate by modern standards. 73 players. Buy-in, $10,000, a serious sum back then. Across from him sat Doyle Brunson, Johnny Moss, legends of the felt already etched into the walls of the horseshoe. Stu didn't look impressed. He later said poker was easy. I don't have to remember as much, he shrugged. That year, he won it. The youngest champion in history at the time, 26 years old. Prize, $365,000. A poker room changes when something like that happens. The hierarchy shifts. People start looking at the same man a little differently. The following year, 1981, he came back and did it again. Back-to-back world championships. In the final hand against Perry Green, Stu held ace-king of clubs. The board ran out in a way that left no doubt. When it was over, he reportedly told Green what he had before turning the cards over. Imagine being so certain of your read that you narrate the ending before the page turns. That kind of confidence doesn't feel learned. And somewhere in all that success, something important never got built. The cards were the only place he ever had to answer to structure. Everywhere else, he moved as if the rules were optional. Talent carried him through childhood, through gin, through the first 2 world titles. It carried him into high-stakes cash games where he'd win 6 figures in a night and lose it just as quickly on sports bets by morning. He loved sports betting, horses, football, anything that moved. The problem was that he believed variance was a rumor. I've known a few men like that over the years. They talk about luck the way a fisherman talks about weather, something that happens to other people. Stu didn't fear losing because he rarely had, and when he did, he assumed the correction was coming. There's a story from those Vegas years. Stu once lost nearly every dollar he had betting football on a Sunday afternoon. By Monday morning, he was sitting in the Golden Nugget, calmly dismantling professionals until the stack in front of him had climbed past 6 figures again. Someone asked him if the loss bothered him. Stu shrugged and said something along the lines of, "If they keep dealing the cards, I'll get it back." By the mid-1980s, cocaine had entered the picture. Not as a headline, just as a companion. Long nights, longer games. Vegas in that era wasn't exactly a wellness retreat. Friends would later say the drugs didn't make him a bad card player, they made him unreliable everywhere else. There's a difference. He could sit at a final table after days without sleep and still dissect hands with surgical precision. But the discipline required to leave the table, to protect what he'd won, that muscle never fully formed. In 1997, Stu Ungar returned to the World Series of Poker main event for the first time in years. He was 43 years old. He was in genuinely poor health. He had to be staked the $10,000 entry fee by a friend and longtime backer named Billy Baxter because he did not have the money himself. That detail alone says something. The 2-time champion of the world needing backers. He arrived looking frail, almost ghost-like, visibly diminished from the player who had blazed through those 1980 and 1981 tournaments like a phenom the game had never seen before. And yet, for stretches of that tournament, he was the old Stu again, reading hands, picking off bluffs, watching everything. And he won. His 3rd main event title, 17 years after his first. Prize money, $1 million. 3 World Series of Poker main events. Only one other man in poker history had reached that number. That 3rd bracelet put him in rare company. Only Johnny Moss had 3 at the time, one of which was awarded by vote in the first 1970 WSOP edition. The photograph from that night, Stu holding the trophy under the horseshoe lights is one of the most haunting images in poker history. Even in the joy of it, you can see what the years have done to him. You can see the distance between the young man who first arrived in Las Vegas and the man standing there in 1997. And yet there he is, the best in the world, again, still. I remember reading that he told friends he could beat anyone, anytime, not in a bragging way, just as a statement of fact. He reportedly told Billy Baxter that night that he felt like the old Stu again, that he thought things were going to be different. Gabe Kaplan even asked if he'd learned anything from the years. Stu said, "Nobody ever beat me playing cards. The only one who ever beat me was me." That kind of belief builds legends. Trouble is, it also leaves a man with nowhere to stand when things go sideways. The real trouble showed up everywhere except the table. Away from the felt, the math stopped working. Money in poker has a way of slipping through your fingers if you don't hold it down. One night, he won more than $200,000 in a poker game at the Mirage. By sunrise, most of it was gone on sports bets and side games. Friends would sometimes try to hold money for him the way you might hold car keys from a friend who's had too much to drink. It rarely worked. Stu could talk his way back into the driver's seat of his own disaster. A disciplined player learns to protect wealth. Stu treated money like oxygen, useful in the moment, forgettable once the hand was over. By the late 90s, stories had shifted tone, not about impossible reads or fearless bluffs, about loans, about disappearing for days, about the weight he'd lost. In November 1998, Stu Ungar was found dead in a cheap motel room off the Las Vegas Strip, the Oasis Motel. Age 45, cause of death, heart failure linked to long-term drug use. There was $800 in his pocket. That number sits heavy. Three-time world champion, once considered the greatest natural card player alive. $800. I've driven past old motels like that, the kind with faded signs and doors that open straight onto the parking lot. You don't expect legends to end there. You expect marble, or at least something that looks intentional. But life doesn't negotiate with talent. What made Stu different wasn't just that he won. Plenty of men have won, but very few have won the way he did. Opponents described feeling exposed, as if he could see through them. He wasn't particularly theatrical. No cowboy hat, no table banter, just focus. When he leaned forward, people folded hands they might have played against anyone else. Even Doyle Brunson once said that playing against Stu felt like the man could see through the backs of the cards. There's a famous moment where Stu reportedly looked at a player across the table and calmly named the two cards in the man's hand. The man stared at him for a moment and folded. And here's the quiet tragedy. The same mind that could map out every possible combination of unseen cards couldn't map out a future that required restraint. Discipline is a strange thing. It usually grows where talent doesn't. The average kid studies longer. The average athlete trains harder. They build habits because they have to. I'm not pretending that discipline would have solved everything. Life's messier than that. But the easy way doesn't always prepare you for anything. I've lost pots I should have won because I got cute, thought I could outsmart variance. Every gambler has that moment where confidence tips into carelessness. With most of us, the lesson cost a few $100 and a bruised ego. With Stu, the stakes were larger, the spotlight brighter, the falls harder. There's an old quote attributed to him. "I never want to be called a good player. I want to be called the best." That kind of hunger can be fuel. It can also be fire without a fireplace. In the end, what lingers isn't just the trophies. To folks like me, it's the feeling people describe when they talk about him. Ask any poker player and they'll sing about him like they witnessed something rare. A brain operating at full capacity in a narrow arena, moving faster than the rest of the room could keep up with. His daughter Stephanie once spoke about wanting people to remember the brilliance, not just the decline. That's fair. Brilliance deserves daylight. But stories have shadows. Spend enough nights in a casino and you start noticing things. The lights never dim. The carpets swallow footsteps. Time starts behaving strangely. It's a place where the edges start to blur. Stu thrived in that blur. Outside it, the world kept sharper corners. When people talk about inevitability, they usually mean fate, something written in advance, something fixed. I'm not sure it works that way. What feels inevitable is often just a pattern repeated long enough that no one interrupts it. Stu Ungar could calculate the odds of a river card hitting with frightening accuracy. He could tell you what you held and why you were wrong to hold it. He could stare across green felt and make seasoned professionals doubt themselves. But life isn't like a poker table. Everything gets dealt at once, and there's no discard pile you can study in hindsight. Somewhere in the archives, there's footage of him lifting that gold bracelet. Small frame, slight smile, the room clapping. For a moment, everything aligned. Talent, timing, belief. That's the image most people choose to keep. A young man under bright lights, certain of the math. And maybe that's enough. Because for a few years there, if you loved cards, you got to watch something close to perfect. A mind moving faster than the rest of us could follow. A reminder that genius exists, even if it doesn't stay. I reckon if there's a card room beyond all this, Stu's already figured out the deck, already counted what's left, already leaning forward while somebody else wonders how he knew. And somewhere between the shuffle and the turn, he's smiling that small, certain smile. The cards were never the problem for Stu Ungar. He could read every card ever dealt to him. Trouble was, life doesn't let you peek at your own cards. There are other gambling stories worth remembering. Some of them even end happily. If you're still here, pull up a chair. The house never closes.